Welcome to another episode of Eat, Smoke, Drink. Today I'm reviewing Divergence whiskey. Divergence whiskey is a New Zealand craft whiskey. What makes it interesting is that, of course, it's made in New Zealand. It's not traditionally Scotch, but also one of the bottles here is actually a sloe gin barrel finished for 12 months, which is actually one of the first, well, from what I've seen, one of the first in the world to be finished in a sloe gin barrel. So the first bottle we have here, we have a virgin French oak. It is 2017 to 2021, so roughly 4 years. And then we have new French oak finished in a sloe gin barrel, 2017 to 2021, which is also roughly 4 years. So look, let's get reviewing and let's get nosing. These whiskies are always interesting because, well, let me tell you why they're interesting after we start sniffing. So let's get nosing. So look, I mean, these whiskies are more of a highlight of what can be done in a shorter amount of time. I mean, they're sippable, they're great cocktail mixes, and they're also, well, I guess you could also put them in as a work in progress category as well, because this particular distillery is based in Christchurch, New Zealand, and they're actually putting away bigger barrels for older maturation. But of course, when it comes to craft distilleries, you have to keep in mind that as well as selling gin and liqueurs, vodka, they have to be able to fund their maturation of whiskies, and so they have to release work in progress to kind of show you what the new releases are going to be, and kind of a bit of a, what's that word, a bit of an insight to what the older releases will be eventually. So let's get nosing. Quite a ballsy nose straight away. That French oak is definitely quite prominent. Now, from memory, these are all from smaller barrels. Don't quote me on that. But it doesn't actually, like, I'm not too concerned about the barrel size or anything. I'm more concerned about the finished product. Lightly tannинed, a bit of passion fruit, banana, white pepper and ginger. I can smell a slight astringency to that as well. I can't describe it, like a drying property. I can smell some, you can definitely get that new oak smell, almost like when you have a white wine and you can smell the oak over the white wine. You can definitely smell that quite prominent. But you wouldn't expect any less, considering that it is a new French oak. Some herbaceousness in there, cloves, aniseed. I'm surprised that the new make isn't as prominent on the nose, but that's probably because it is quite a, well, the barrel's new, a new virgin barrel, so you know it does definitely cover up that new make nose. If you try very hard, you do get a little bit of that as well. Of course, it is a young whiskey, you can't deny that. But new make is not always a negative thing. Sometimes the youthfulness, they call it, the youthfulness of a whiskey can actually add to the experience. It can actually add body, it can add complexity, ballsiness, I call it. There's a condensed floral note to that as well. I can't put my finger on what kind of flower it is, but there's also a hint of smoke in the background of this French oak. I'm thinking when you're when you're traveling in Asia and you have that incense smell in a temple, that's what you get. Look at that incense in the distance. Let's smell the sloe. Chalk and cheese, two different noses. It smells sticky, it smells more viscous. I can get a licorice note out of that quite heavily. I definitely get that berry. Now, because it has been aged in whiskey, I mean, I wouldn't say it's sloe berry. I'd be biased for saying that, because knowing that it's sloe berry, a sloe gin, but it's condensed boysenberry and blackberry jam. But very herbal, a little peppery, white pepper, a little bit of black pepper. Both spirits are very clean smelling spirits. You know, there's no funkiness, there's no dirtiness to it. A little earthiness on the sloe berry one, but they're both sweet in theme. They're both very clean in theme. Now, I'm not entirely sure where the clean note comes from. It could be the distilling style, the distilling, the stills they use, but it's definitely, there's no funk, there's no dirtiness, there's no heaviness to it. It's very fresh and vibrant. Going back to the French vanilla, French oak. I'm getting a little bit of a brown sugar syrup in there. Going back to the sloe gin. I'm getting a bit of smoke in the sloe gin. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but there's a hint of smoke in the sloe gin. Yeah, unsure, but there's a hint of smoke in the sloe gin. Finish. Let's get sipping. The smell is clean, the palate is clean, but surprisingly, the palate has quite a substantial mouthfeel. Surprisingly, that is a 46%, so I'm trying that first. I don't want to drown it. The sloe gin is 60.7, so whoo, that is a ballsy one. Sweet brown sugar syrup, burnt butter, aniseed, clove, candied ginger, white pepper, a floral note that I can't put my finger on, passion fruit syrup. Towards the back end, I can get a hint of that new make spirit because of the youthfulness of it. Any young whiskey, you're always going to have that, but not as much as I thought it would. So I'm pleasantly surprised, actually. I mean, if you've seen my other reviews of the younger versions, the first iterations of these ones, so to speak, you could taste it more then. So obviously, year on year, it's developing more and more, and that is a real surprise. That I'm not getting so much of that. But yes, of course, you can get youthfulness to it. It's a young whiskey, but I'm surprised with the mouthfeel for such a young whiskey. But very clean, very focused flavors, and very clean. It slowly subsides, so I would say that the finish is a medium to pushing it medium long finish, but a medium finish, let's say. But obviously that comes with time and age as well, with the added influence from the barrel. But I mean, that's a very sippable whiskey, especially for a young whiskey. Very sippable. I would say that was probably aged in a smaller barrel, more active barrel, smaller barrel, more contact with the wood to accelerate its flavor. You can't always get away with that, in my opinion, of using smaller barrels all the time, but I think that as a earlier release, before they release some older stuff, it is definitely something that would that is helping a lot with with the palate, with the mouthfeel, with the complexity. Let's try the sloe gin. Woof. Sloe gin, very different. I mean, the ABV is almost a third more ABV, much more substantial mouthfeel right there. The alcohol is not as forward as I thought for a 60%, but you can definitely tell the big difference. I get a bitterness from this. I get a bitterness, not an unpleasant bitterness, but I get a bitterness from this, and I like bitter flavors, so that's not a criticism at all. And I'm assuming that is probably from the sloe gin distillate that was in the barrel beforehand. Condensed berries, and surprisingly, this whiskey has some oxidative nature to it as well. It's quite oxidative, but there's no funk, there's no dirtiness, there's no earthiness. There's no dirtiness, no funk, a little bit of earthiness, but the mouthfeel of this is much more thick and substantial and viscous. Brown sugar syrup, condensed jams. So the taste is quite clean, very clean tasting. The spirit is not super oily, but this one here, the finish is much longer, and the new make spirit is definitely less prominent in this than the new French oak. Why that would be? Maybe because there's less separation with the flavors and the cohesion, because it's not watered down versus this one here. But some people obviously would prefer a lower ABV than higher ABV. You can always water it down as well. But the cohesion in this one is phenomenal, because it's cask strength, it's full strength, and there is no cutting of the spirit, so all the flavor is concentrated. Look, I mean, I'm surprised with just a year or so difference with these versus my first review. The development is massive. The added development is absolutely massive, and what I love about it as well is that they are priced accordingly in terms of the age and what they are. They're priced accordingly as well, so they're not taking the piss, because I find that sometimes when you have craft whiskies, they tend to price them ridiculously and people still buy them, so good on them. That's capitalism at work. But when you get the true whiskey drinkers out there that you know, when you're looking at the price you're paying, can you pay for an older Scotch with a bigger history or a craft whiskey? Then you kind of go, well, is it worth it? That's the equation you're looking at. But in saying that, each to their own. That's not, you know, that's a trigger, you know, should have done a trigger warning. But these guys, what I like about it, and a few others as well, they don't. They price them accordingly, you know, they accordingly to make it more reasonable. But the finish, I'm surprised with the finish. I'm surprised with the mouthfeel. I'm surprised with the flavor. I mean, as I was the first bottling as well, and I can see the improvement with a slight age gap with that one and this one as well. And it excites me to know, hey, what happens when we have an 8-year-old release? What happens when we have a 10-year-old release from a bigger barrel? So slower maturation from a bigger barrel over time. What happens then? That's going to be the exciting part, because, you know, if they can make a whiskey that tastes sippable and enjoyable at this age, then, you know, I'm really looking forward to what happens several years down the track as well. You could actually mix this with cocktails too. I reckon there would be excellent whiskeys and cocktails. I'm not sure about ice. I probably wouldn't use them for ice, because I think as you put them with ice, you will destroy the nuanced flavors of the spirit. So I would say either cocktail mixer or sip them straight. But, you know, like I said, you know, if someone was to say to me that these are probably 7-8 years old, I would probably say, yeah, that's accurate in terms of Scotch standards, because Scotch, they don't tend to do as much experimentation with the barrels. They're bigger produced with bigger barrels and just warehousing them. These guys went out of their way to make sure they tune the spirit, and as do other craft distillers in New Zealand as well. They tune it so the spirit is, you know, aging a little bit faster for that first formative years. But you know, the ultimate measure is what happens longer when you have an older whiskey, slower maturation. How does it taste then from a bigger barrel, not a small barrel? Because a small barrel can sometimes be slightly forced when it comes to aging. I don't think these are forced, but if you put whiskey in a smaller barrel and age it for ages, then it could become too over-flavored. I know that sounds weird, but it could become over-flavored by the barrel and the balance of it off kilter. But for now, look, I think these are very interesting bottles. I should actually make an effort more to try and get more New Zealand craft distillers. But, you know, I obviously I get access to my whiskies from our tastings that I hold, so, you know, we don't usually have craft whiskies in those tastings, and so there lies the problem. Until next time, make sure you eat, smoke, drink. That is medical advice, science. Cheers.